Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Lieutenant Commander Annette Nelson, who is the great niece of Private Ewen McColl, Knight. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family, visitors to the memorial and cadets from New South Wales, 26 Army Cadet Unit Wollongong, from Victoria, 37, 38 and 301 Army Cadet units, and representatives from the Australian Air Force Cadets. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the hearts of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Ewen McColl Knight. Ewen McColl Knight was born on the 5th of February 1918 to Maud and Hugh Knight of the Melbourne suburb of Box Hill. Knight grew up with his parents, brothers Clive and Ian, and his sister Edna, and went to school at Colewis to the east of Geelong. In the difficult years of the Great Depression, Ewen and his brother Ian found work by travelling around rural Victoria and performing farm labourer duties such as wood cutting, land clearing, fencing, road and bridge repair. In early June 1940, Knight and his brother Ian applied to join the Australian military at the Myers Street Drill Hall in Geelong and formally enlisted into the 2nd Australian Imperial Force at Royal Park in Melbourne on the 26th of June. The two brothers would serve together in the same unit throughout their time in the war. Their siblings would also serve, Clive in the 7th Division of the Australian Imperial Force, Edna in the Australian Women's Army Service. After enlisting, Knight and his brother Ian trained at Wangaratta and Bonagilla and joined the 2nd 24th Australian Infantry Battalion. On the 16th of November 1940, they embarked on the transport ship Strathmore and sailed for Palestine. Knight and his unit camped and trained near Gaza, and when on leave took the opportunity to visit sites such as Jerusalem, Bethlehem and the Dead Sea. In early 1941, Knight and the 2nd 24th Battalion moved to Libya for further training and camped near the Tokra Pass east of Benghazi to guard an important road junction. The battalion held its position, but in the face of overwhelming German attack, made an organised retreat to Tobruk in early April. Ewen's brother Ian later wrote in his memoirs of his wartime experience with their time in Libya was dominated by dust storms, dive-bombing enemy aircraft and artillery fire. Knight and the 2nd 24th Battalion entered Tobruk as the Germans began to besiege the town and spent the following weeks manning the defensive front lines in the desert. At the end of April, Knight and his brother were holding their position when the battalion came under heavy German attack. The Australian troops were able to hold off German infantry troops, but became surrounded when German tanks passed their flanks. By the morning of the 1st of May 1941, the troops had expended all of their ammunition and were taken as prisoners of war by the German forces. Ewen and Ian stayed together for almost their entire time as prisoners of war. At first they were put to work clearing airfields and transporting materials for Axis forces in North Africa. In August 1941, they were transported from Tripoli to Italy, where they entered an internment camp at Capua in the shadow of Mount Vesuvius. After Capua, Knight and his brother were transferred to Udine in far northeastern Italy, where they passed an extremely cold and bitter winter. It was often difficult for prisoners of war to keep in contact with their family. The Knight family heard that Ewen and Ian were missing, presumed prisoners in May 1941, but heard no more of the fate of the brothers for 8 months. In their second winter in prison camp in Italy, while still in Udine, Ewen fell ill with a severe case of meningitis. He was taken to the local convent hospital, but despite medical treatment, died on the 30th of January 1943. He was 24 years old. His loss was deeply felt by all the Allied prisoners of war at the camp in Udine, and his brother Ian later thanked convent staff who had treated his sick brother and the Italian camp guards who allowed for Ewen to be buried with military honours, including a gun salute. Knight is buried in the Udine War Cemetery, where over 400 soldiers of the Second World War now lie. His epitaph reads, "For King and Country." His name is listed on the roll of honour to my left, amongst almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Ewen McColl Knight, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening.